Hey everybody, and welcome to another Project Egg interview. Today we're talking to Joel Ivers from Pasadena, California. How you doing today, Joel?
I'm good, thank you.
Good, good. Thanks a lot for coming on today. So let's jump right in, and I want to start by asking you, what is your story?
What is my story? You mean my from the entrepreneurial story or my whole story or what?
Your whole story, whatever you feel comfortable sharing.
Well, I never said, since this is about entrepreneurism, I never really started out to be an entrepreneur. Back in my day, that wasn't something that you majored in or even talked about. If you started a business, okay, but not too many people did that. So I took a pretty straight and narrow path, went through college, majored in chemistry, went to grad school, was in a Ph.D. program at Indiana University for molecular biology and genetics. Decided that I really didn't want to finish my PhD. I took my master's degree. I didn't love the research and decided that what I liked about grad school was teaching. So I left. I became certified and I taught high school chemistry for 3 years. And I was successful doing that, started an AP chemistry program at the high school I was at. Um, and I had a successful team that competed for state prize everybody in the state took a test in Ohio, and the team that had the highest scores won the state, and our team won the state. So I had done a lot in a couple of years. I had gotten tenure, so I was ready to stay as a teacher, but I realized I'd never make any money. So I decided it was time to move on. Over Christmas break, I went to a recruiter and said, hey, at the end of the school year, I want to get a job in sales in some sort of technical area since I have a technical degree. And he said, there's something open right now. Go talk to the manager. I went to talk to the guy right there. And within 2 weeks, I had resigned my teaching position. And the next thing you know, I was working for a division of Johnson and Johnson. So it was a great opportunity to begin my career and have professional training. But I was just a science guy who was moving into the business world. So I was a sales rep for several years and then promoted to division manager, moved up to Michigan for a couple of years, and it was time to move on, to move ahead with J&J, but I'd have to move to New Jersey, and I really didn't want to do that. So stayed in the Midwest and found a marketing position in Cincinnati, Ohio, which is where I had been, and was in marketing for a company. And from there, it was a clinical research company. From there, got a call from a headhunter about 5 or 6 years later. Did I want to start a sort of an entrepreneur position? It was a new division, a new technology within a biotech company in La Jolla, California. Did I want to take this product and launch it worldwide? And it was in an area I was familiar with. So I said yes, and I did that. And that's really what got me started on the path of being an entrepreneur. So launched this product worldwide. We had to obtain regulatory approval from the US FDA, from Japanese regulators, and other countries around the world, and figure out shipping. It was a big ordeal. So I had a lot of good experience, international experience, doing all that, and and that was working just fine. But then a whole group of us were approached by investors. A group of us at that company were approached by investors who wanted to form a new startup biotech company. And it was the sister company of Human Genome Sciences in Rockville, Maryland. And that was a big opportunity at the time when the human genome was being sequenced. So we decided to do it. So a whole group of us left the company I was at and started up another company with funding from one of the largest healthcare, it's called Healthcare Ventures now, largest healthcare investment firm, VC firm in the country, or maybe the
Wow,
world.
wow,
So we had an opportunity to do that. We had an initial start of $12 million before we even set foot in the place, and we began a biotech company. So did that for several years, launched product again worldwide, and the company had some issues with where it was being located, and it was on the East Coast, and the next was on the West Coast. And at some point in time, I decided I really didn't want to move. So they said, look, you need to decide if you're going to move to the West Coast or not. And I chose not to. And so from there, I I found a position back in clinical research in Ohio, which is where I had been living. And eventually, I decided that I really didn't want to just be a marketing guy. I wanted to run a company and wanted to start a company. So I obtained a position that was a general manager of a division of a company, worked my way into COO, and from there we then decided to sell the company, and I was one of the three principals, sold the company, and then when we were sold, the new venture firm made me CEO. So that's kind of how I made my way into that whole thing. So I was fortunate in that, did that for a couple of years, and but unfortunately, the venture group that we bought made us promises that they never really kept, and I decided that that wasn't working out for me and it wasn't working for them. So I left and I became independent for a couple of years, and then eventually found my way into some startup companies. And without going into all the detail, I was a part of 3 or 4 different startup companies, and eventually raising money on my own to get these companies going. They were all in a technical area, all in diagnostics or pharmaceuticals, either OTC or RX drugs, and and did that for several years. And then I had an opportunity near the end of my career to actually run a venture capital firm. So I was recruited also for that, and decided, oh, this will be fun to be on the other side of the desk when I can decide whether people should get money or not. And at that point, I had seen enough business plans and been through enough myself, in terms of raising money and what value proposition I had to bring to an investor and to clients. And so I took that and did that for a couple of years until I decided to retire and move down to Florida, which is now where I live. So that's my story in a nutshell.
Wow. So how many companies did you start or end up on the top of in your total time?
I think I have to count them all. I think it's 5. I think it's 5. I have to look at my resume because I forget over time. But I think it's about 5 different companies. That's what I was in that position.
That's incredible. So let's go back a little bit because I kind of want to dive into your history a little bit more. You started off with a chemistry degree.
Right.
You started off teaching.
Right.
What parts of your schooling and the chemistry, what parts kind of came back that you saw as an entrepreneur?
Well, clearly, when you're an entrepreneur, you have to explain to your audience, and that audience is either investors or customers, what it is you have and what you have, why you have something valuable. So after you teach high school for 3 years, which is what I did, and you've got this, group of 25 students, some of whom want to be there, some of whom don't, you have to figure out how to be entertaining but yet informative in order to make them listen and make them interested in what you're doing. So I found that the teaching experience was probably among the most valuable experience that I had early on, that I drew on all the time. And I had to give tons of speeches and lectures and presentations over and over again. When you do your pitches, it's basically like teaching a class. So all that experience really helped me. It really was valuable.
That's incredible. But I kind of want to keep going into your history. You said that experience was incredibly valuable, but at what point did you say to yourself, teaching is not enough for me, I need to go to the next step, and how did you deal with those emotions?
Well, I think to be frank, I had friends I had a master's degree and was in a Ph.D. program, so I had advanced some more education than most of the guys. And I had friends who had a bachelor's degree and they had gotten good jobs with companies. They had company cars, they had expense accounts and all this stuff. And I was a teacher making, around $10,000 a year at the time. And I thought to myself, this is ridiculous. I'm more educated than these people. I have skill sets, as good as skill sets as they do. There's no reason why I should be suffering. So it was a financial decision. It was difficult to leave because I had tenure. I had had a successful teaching career. I was in really one of the best schools in the state of Ohio. Um, but you just have to let that go, and you do take a leap of faith, and that's a big part of being an entrepreneur anyway later on. But you have to just say, okay, I'm going to give this a shot, not knowing whether or not it was worth it, or if it would be worth it. So you just have to do that, and you just have to let go with the stable part of your life, and just hope for the best.
And that kind of brings me to my next point. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I feel like a lot of people, they like the security, they like the stability
Right.
of go to school, get a job, you know.
Mm.
Um, but what advice would you give to people who they might be right on that cusp of taking the leap, but they're not quite ready to jump? How would you kind of help them take that jump? What advice would you give them?
Well, they have to think about where they want to be, in 5 or 10 years. I think that's the biggest thing. I mean, can you close your eyes and say, okay, if I don't do anything, I know exactly what I'm going to be doing in 5 years. And if you're the kind of person that you need that, then you probably shouldn't take the leap. On the other hand, if you're a person that is okay with uncertainty, then you should take the leap. And if your goal is a big enough goal. I mean, for me, I knew that I couldn't get married. I mean, I was married, but I knew it would be hard to have children and not have both of us work full time unless I had a better job, unless I was making more money. And that motivated me to do that. But you have to be that kind of person that takes chances. And if you're not that kind of person, you really should admit that to yourself at that point and just say, you know what, this isn't for me, because it really isn't for everybody. Not everybody can do that. So it's just a self-examination is really what you have to do more than anything else.
But just to be sure, I don't think either of us are saying that not being an entrepreneur is a bad thing. You can.
Correct.
I
That's
feel
right.
like everybody should do what they feel most comfortable doing, and what they feel best suits them. Like you said, it's a lot of self reflection.
Right.
But I'm also of the opinion that I think everybody should at least try. They should at least try, and if they don't like it, they can stop doing it. But to go back to your story, um, when you were jumping into different companies, and you started off in sales, I believe, and then you
Right.
were working your way up.
Right.
What were the most important traits that you had to exhibit in order to keep moving up? In other words, what are the best traits to have as an entrepreneur?
Well, I think the focus is you've got to, what I always tell my kids too, you always have to do the best job you can do at the job you're assigned to do at that point in time. Most people try to look ahead too fast and too much. And really, the best advice is to just be fabulous at what you're supposed to be doing. And if you're fabulous at what you're doing, you'll get recognition for that one way or the other. So it's say, okay, here's my job today, here's what I have to do, and just make sure that you get that done and do it well, and you're successful, and things usually take care of themselves. That's really the most important thing of all.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, we kind of talked a little bit about your past, so I kind of want to talk a little bit about your present and what you're doing right now. So, could you maybe give some insight as to what Joel Ivers is up to today?
Well, it's a little difficult. I retired 2 years ago, moved down to Florida, and
Congratulations, by the way.
and so I'm in a great position where I don't have to work if I don't want to, but I kind of want to do something. And what I started to, and the other issue is when you move, I lost my whole network, all my network of people and individuals, all my LinkedIn people. Not everybody was in Ohio, but certainly a large number of people were there because I had spent years, doing work there. Uh, so down here, I had to start over again. So I started going to some networking events. I basically figured out what the organizations were, the venture capital groups in particular. So I went to some events, started to meet people, and eventually I was asked to be a mentor for a startup program called Startup Quest in Fort Lauderdale. And I was a mentor to a group of 11 people. We had to choose a technology, build a business plan, create a pitch, and then enter a competition with about 10 other teams. So I did that for several months a year ago. And that was an interesting experience, to say the least. And from that, I met a whole bunch of different people, and I've had maybe 3 or 4 different business opportunities, things that we've wanted to start, new businesses we wanted to start, anything from a new venture capital fund to new consulting firms to actually taking some technology and creating a company around it. So those are all options, and I've pursued all of them. Unfortunately, for one reason or another, none of them have worked out so far. So I'm in the position of still searching for what that is. And because I have the luxury of time, I can wait until the right thing comes up before I jump to do anything. So that's kind of what I'm doing now. And just a week or so ago, I was asked to be a mentor for another program, a similar type program. So I'm going to do that because it'll give me more exposure to more people, and then I'll figure it out. So at this point, I'm just trying to find the right thing that makes the most sense.
Absolutely,
So that's
absolutely.
what I'm doing. And then if not, I'm just enjoying myself.
Right. So, with all of your experience, working in companies, building companies, running companies, investing in companies, what would you say for somebody who might just want to start up a company, or um, let's focus on just starting up a new company. What do you think are the most important steps that they need to take to go from day one to customer one?
Well, clearly they have to figure out what it is they want to sell, and what service or product do they want to sell. And then before they can get too far, they have to figure out, well, what is it that they can offer, and what is the competitive landscape such that can they offer something that either other people don't, or they can offer it a lot better or faster or cheaper? Is there some hook that they have that's valuable? They then have to test that pretty carefully on who they think their customers are. And what that means is talking to lots of people. So they take their idea, their concept, whatever they've put together, and they go talk to people and see if people can, if people would actually buy it. So the big thing is lots of people will tell you, oh, that's a great idea. I think that's great. But the question is, can you put it down into, okay, here's a product or service, here's what it's going to cost, and if you had an opportunity to buy it, Mr. Customer, will you buy it? Would you do this? And if they say no, then you've got to say why not, and you've got to figure it all out. The point is you've got to do a lot of that because you've got to, early sell, if you will, or pre-sell in order to figure out if you have something somebody cares about. Because a lot of times you have great ideas, but nobody really cares, and so there's no point. So you've got to figure that out quickly. You also have to figure out on the finance side, how much money is it going to take to bring this product, if it's a product, to fruition? How long is that going to take? You've got to create a decent business plan and figure out, what those steps are, first of all, how much each of those steps are going to take, figure out your timeline, and then if you have to raise money, you obviously need that information coupled with the client feedback information and coupled with the, here's my product and here's what it does and why it's important. Take all that to an investor if you want somebody to invest in you. And if you're in a startup mode, you can only hope to invest, you probably get about maybe $500,000 from somebody before you have any revenue. Before you have any revenue at all, you could probably get, anything from 50,000 to, I'd say, 500,000 in a pre-revenue sort of situation where you've done all those steps I just described. And then once you've done that and let's say you've launched the product, then you have to have at least $1 million in revenue and multiple repeat customers, not just single customers, but repeat customers. And then you can go after bigger dollars, $1 million up to 5 million, et cetera. So those are the steps that you have to take, I think, in order to get there. But the core thing is, what am I selling, and does anyone care, and will they pay for it? That's the biggest part.
Right, right. And when you're talking about figuring out what you can sell, I feel like a lot of people struggle with that because they
Yes.
might not think that anything that they can create or provide is worth money. So for somebody who's trying to start a business but maybe doesn't know what that could be, what would be some good ways for them to figure out things that they can sell?
Well, I think they have to first look inside in themselves and say, what am I interested in? Because you've got to be passionate about what it is you're selling anyway. So you've got to say, what's out there in the world? I mean, you have to be observant. Where do I see a need? Where do I see a need where there should be a product or a service and nobody's offering that today? I mean, all the apps that people have created, somebody said, oh, well, how about if I could get a ride anytime I wanted it just by a touch on my phone? And then Uber was formed, those kinds of things. Or, gee, I'm always at the supermarket and I never can find, something in the market. Maybe there's some way that you could figure out for each store how people could go on their phone and, tap something and, oh, here's where the cherries are, or here's where the peanut butter is, or who knows? I'm just coming up with stuff off the top of my head. But you've got to figure out what's out there, where there's a real need, and then do you care? Are you interested in that? The other source of the other way to do it, so that's kind of a more organic way. The other way, of course, is there are technology transfer offices in virtually every major university in the world, and you can go to a technology transfer office and say, is there any technology here that the university would like to license, and that that I can license from the university, and then you find something you're interested in and then put together an agreement. Most universities will let you do some licensing without upfront money, at least for a while, and there's some royalties baked in on the other end, but that's the other way to find technology. So it's either something you figure out makes sense because there's a need, or you find a technology, and then of course you have to look at the marketplace to see if the world cares. Those are the two sort of basic ways. Or you're sitting around with a bunch of friends having a bunch of drinks, and then you talk about, you brainstorm what would be a good thing, what do you care about, or what do you find that you don't have or that you would need, which really leads to sort of a generic market research. I suppose if you had an idea, you asked everybody you knew, that might give you some more ideas. That's really about what we do.
And that kind of leads me into my next question of, so we just addressed figuring out what it is you're going to sell, but in order to figure out if customers actually care about it, if they're willing to buy it, that's a whole different story. Could you maybe give some insight as to how to figure that out?
Well, it's pretty straightforward. Like I said, you put together, okay, here's what I'm going to sell. You document it one way or the other, or put it together in a PowerPoint presentation, and then you say who would be the likely buyer. You call some people up, or you ask somebody and you get referrals. That's really the best way to do it. So it's a warm visit rather than a cold call. It's a warm call, and that you say, hey, I just want to. I have this idea for this product that I'm working on, or this company I'm working on. Would you be willing to help me out by listening to what I have to say to get your feedback on it? In other words, you usually don't walk in there to say, hey, I want to sell you, 10 dozen of these. You ask for people for feedback, and so then you make an appointment, and then you present to them what it is you have, and then you ask some open-ended questions and closed questions. Will you buy this? What do you think of this? How do you think this could best be used? What do you think this competes with? What else would you buy if you didn't buy this from me? Or what are you using today? If you had your wish, what would the ideal product look like? Those kinds of questions. And you've got to actually physically, it's really not that hard. You just have to do it. And the problem that I see is that most people skip that step, and they develop, but they really don't have any feedback from the marketplace. And then they go to launch or something, and they fall flat on their face because they really don't have any real world feedback. And the sooner you take it to the market, that's part of lean launch, I think, too. And the sooner you take it to the marketplace, the better off you are.
Absolutely.
Even if you get negative feedback, because then you can figure out what it is good or what isn't good.
Right. And I believe there's a term called the minimum viable product, or minimal viable product.
MVP, or minimum viable product, is a standard term that's used, and it's really just it's like creating a prototype that's the the minimum viable. In other words, it works and but it's minimal. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles on it necessarily that you're going to want to have on it, but it's the basic product that works. Now, sometimes you can have a minimum viable product. You can first create a concept of what that would be, so it's just on paper. But generally, then you want to create a minimum viable prototype of some sort in order to show that to people, to demonstrate what it is you have. But it is just the basic widget, if you will, that does something so you can prove it to somebody else and get feedback. That's what it is.
That's brilliant. And I really do appreciate you adding value to this call, because I think one of the staples of entrepreneurship is adding value to others, and that's what we aim to do through Project A. So I do thank you for that. But to go back to your story, so we talked a little bit about where you came from, your past. We talked about your present, what you're doing now. What do you think the future holds for Joel Ivers? In other words, what is the one thing that you have to accomplish in your lifetime?
Oh boy, that's a tough question. That's a really tough question. Um, I think I've been a part of products and companies and new ideas that really made a difference in somebody's life, but you never can do enough of that. So for me, I'd like to be a part of something that's even more impactful than anything I've done before. In terms of you know um, working on a project, working on a product that really makes a difference in somebody's life. So it's more there's more of a human side to it than just here's a widget and I can sell it and it's better than other widgets on the market. It's something that has some intrinsic human value. That's probably the one thing I'm looking for, that I would like to do. But when I say that, with that said, I also was interested, as I told you earlier, in forming a venture capital firm, another one down here in Florida, partly because I see a gap in the marketplace here. I don't see that there are enough firms for my experiences in early stage companies, and there are very few firms down here. There's some angel groups, but not even them. Even then, they're not that sophisticated or large. But I think there's a gap in the marketplace. I figured that out. That if I had a firm or was part of a firm like that, we could invest, and then you can really multiply your value because you can invest in a whole bunch of companies, and each one of them has an opportunity to do something significant. So it could be looked at that way as well. That's kind of what I want to do.
Absolutely, and I think that really speaks to your character. That you want to make a greater impact on others. So we talked about your life and kind of the path that you've taken, but I'm sure that along the way you had some help because you've done some incredible things. So could you point to anybody who, or multiple people who you would say have been mentors to you?
Um, yeah, of course. The very first mentor was, well, I had a manager when I was in sales. I had a sales manager that lived in Atlanta. I was in Ohio at the time, and he was a very positive person, and he was a mentor. What I learned from him is he always provided, if there's feedback to be provided, it was always done in a positive way, and it was always how we can make you better, or whatever, as opposed to you didn't do this right and you didn't do that right. So he was a great mentor in terms of how to deal with people, because dealing with people is a huge part of being an entrepreneur, because you've got to be dealing with people at all sorts of different levels, above you, below you, next to you, etc. So he was the first one. The second mentor was when I made the jump from sales to marketing. And if you recall from my background, I never took any class. I never took a marketing class in my life. In fact, I only took, I think I told you, one business class in my entire life, economics. But other than that, I was a scientist by education, and I learned everything else on my own. So I found myself running a marketing group, and I really didn't have any background in it, but it didn't matter because it kind of came naturally. But I did have a guy that was the account executive at my advertising agency. And he was older than I was, maybe 25 years older than I was. And he, of course, had been a part of many, many product launches and many rebranding exercises and many corporate identity projects, et cetera, et cetera. So he kind of took me under his wing. And even though I was his client, he taught me everything. So he's the one that told me, well, here's what you do for this and here's what you do for that. And they were very valuable experiences. So he was probably my second mentor that I look at the most fondly on. We spent 5 or 6 years doing projects together, and but he taught me most everything. After that time, there are people that I worked not exactly with, but I mean not exactly for, but with people who ran venture firms. I can think of one guy who ran a venture firm, and I just was able to observe what he did and how he did things, and what criteria he used to invest, and I found that very useful. Not only later on when I was doing the same thing, but even it helped me figure out, okay, well, what do I present to investors? How do I make the best possible impact on people when I'm doing a pitch? So he was probably the third. So I think mentors are really important and really helpful, and you've got to be open to their constant thoughts and ideas.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think one of the best parts of having mentors is having that influx of ideas and thoughts that
Yep.
that it kind of opens your mind and helps you get some perspective. Um,
Absolutely.
so, in addition to mentors, what other sources of education did you seek as an entrepreneur? Because, as you said, you never went to any business classes. Yeah.
Well, I did take the I don't even know if they still have it, but years ago the American Management Association had a business course. So I guess I have to amend my earlier statement. I did take their course or started their coursework, and the one economics class I took was in preparation to earn an MBA. So I was accepted to an MBA program, and this was my first prerequisite. The problem with that is I got promoted and had to move. So I left the state, so I couldn't go to school there. So I never did that. But what I did mostly was read and talk to lots of people and observe. So I read a ton of articles. I was always reading articles, or if a new book came out or whatever, and that would help. And then I would go to a lecture or presentations if they were ever given, especially if they were free. And I could go and just listen, and then you learn as much from talking to other people, meeting people who might be there, as from anything else. So it was mostly reading and talking to other people is what I did for my career. And then, of course, seek out experts when you don't know what you're doing. I mean, when I was doing something in marketing, and in my career, marketing went from something that was very stable to, when digital marketing came in, you had to change everything. I mean, we had to create a website. That was a big deal when websites first came out, and then we decided to use Flash. Well, for one of our early websites. Well, that was a big deal. Nobody used Flash. And so I had to work with the ad agency and the design firm to figure all that out. So you have to work with those other kinds of people, and you learn from them as well. So that's really what I did in my career.
Fantastic.
It would have been nice to get that MBA and have that experience. It probably would have shortcut a lot of things I had to do. On the other hand, I had to figure it out myself, and there's some value in doing that too. So,
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, you did mention that you read a lot, and you read articles and books and whatnot. If you could point to maybe 2 or 3 books that you would recommend to aspiring entrepreneurs, what would it
well,
be?
there's so many more books out now than the stuff that I read years ago. I'm not sure I could do that. Um, I really couldn't put my finger on something. I haven't looked at that kind of stuff in a lot of years. And um, actually, I wrote a book, or I was part of writing a book. I guess I should recommend that. I wonder if I have it. If I have it where that is in my office here. Anyway, it's it's a book that I wrote it with a colleague in New York City, and it's called oh gosh, I have to remember um, the 10 lies people marketers tell themselves when doing a startup company. The 10 marketing lies they talk themselves into when they do a startup company. And so we came up with it was around a presentation that I gave to a I was invited to give a presentation to a Chamber of Commerce group of all things. And so I came up with this idea of these lies people tell themselves. For example, well, I don't want to share my technology because people will steal it, and that's really stupid. You've got to talk about what you're doing, and that's a good thing. So we came up with 10 of them, and I have that book, and that would be one thing I still give that out. I forgot about that. um,
Fantastic.
so that was kind of a fun thing to do. I don't really have any other titles to offer you today. I
That's
can
okay.
come back to that, but I don't have anything off the top of my head.
That's still a really good recommendation, something that you wrote originally. Um,
Yep.
so I guess I have two more questions for you.
Okay.
Um, One would be if you had one piece of advice that you could leave behind to serve as your legacy, what would it be?
For an entrepreneur, you mean?
Yes.
Um, I would say, um, actually, I'm going to pull something out here, and I don't know if you can see it here. I've got a little, it's really a paperweight. I don't know if you can read it or not, but
Yeah.
it's a Winston Churchill quote that I really like, and it's really for entrepreneurs too. And it says, "If you're going through hell, keep going." And Winston Churchill wrote that during World War II when they were clearly going through hell in England. But as an entrepreneur, you can't give up. And if you're going through hell, if you're having problems, you just got to keep working. So a lot of it is the perspiration side in terms of, just keep trying. This doesn't work, try that. This doesn't work, try that. And you just got to keep going. So that would be my advice. And of course, he coined that phrase nicely. I like it.
Absolutely. That's great. So I guess my final question is, um, is there anything about yourself that you think is an important part of who you are that I did not ask you about today? In other words, what did I miss?
I think we've covered most of the big topics. I think the one thing we didn't talk about, we talked about it a little bit, is passion for what you're doing, and because that will drive you, that'll help you going to keep going through hell. If you have passion about what you're doing, if you really believe in it, and you don't let other people talk you out of it. Yeah, we didn't talk about that. There will be naysayers along the way for every single thing you do. People will tell you you can't do it, you can't do it, that doesn't make sense, you're wasting your time. But if you in your gut really feel it's good and what you're offering is valuable, and you've done your homework and you know someone cares about it, then you just have to keep pursuing it no matter how hard it is. That's really what you have to do. So that's that whole concept.
Absolutely. And I wholeheartedly agree. I think that's some of the best advice an entrepreneur can have. So, I just want to say thank you for spending time, sharing today. And for everybody listening, this has been another Project Egg interview. Today we've been talking to Joel Ivers from Pasadena, California. Thank you very much.